Hey, everybody. Welcome into another Red Chip Heroes Poker Podcast. It's Monday morning, and I'm your guy, Choppadong. We're going to talk poker. We're going to talk starting hand ranges. And if you want to know where we're coming from or who we're brought to you by, it's the Sharp app and DFSArmy.com. Really and truly, we've got everything covered from sports betting to daily fantasy sports, and now we're building out a poker community. And I am the Red Chip Heroes Poker Podcast host. Join our Discord for free. The link will be down there in the description. And we're going to talk starting hand ranges today because the more I dig into the community, the more I find out people need the fundamentals. They need a starting point. Maybe you're the kind of guy that would love to always go in and always thought you'd like to go play poker in a casino, but you're a little bit too shy. You don't really understand where to start. Maybe you think you're going to get yourself taken advantage of by a bunch of sharks. Well, follow me, and the Beginner Poker Series podcasts are going to get you skinning those donkeys in no time, because it's just not that hard at the lowest stakes in a live casino. Now, if you're the type of person that wants to play online, wants to play tournaments, wants to play different games like PLO, you want to jump up in stakes, you need to follow our intermediate poker podcast. So we're going to dive into a little bit more theory, a little bit more sophisticated poker lingo, and we can help you there too. But for now, let's start with the starting hand ranges here with the Red Chip Heroes Monday Morning Podcast, and let's talk about position. Let's talk about why we want to stay in position in poker. It leads to those starting hands. It allows us to play the later we act in position. Now, again, we started with a podcast last week, 10 tips to becoming a winning poker player. It talked about position, talked about the seats, hijack, low jack, under the gun. If all of that is foreign to you, get in our Discord and talk with us, and we'll bring you up to speed. I'm assuming you at least have a working knowledge of some of the general lingo when it comes to No Limit Texas Hold'em. And following along, once you get a little bit of that lingo, this stuff will start making more sense to you. But position, the closer you are to act, the closer you are to last act, to being on the dealer button, the more information you gather about who likes their hand. Which player type is that guy? Is he tight? Is he loose? Does he play a lot of cards? Does he not? Is he aggressive? Is he passive? Is he easy to play against? Is he hard to play against? And how should I react? The more information you get, the more decisions you're going to make that are better, the more profitable you're going to play. So we try to stay, quote, in position as much as we can, and we try to avoid being, quote, out of position, because then we're giving information about our hands. We need stronger cards to withstand some of the pressure that we're going to receive from everybody getting that kind of information against us. Okay? General rules, general guidelines. But if we look down here at these starting hand charts, again, if you saw the first podcast, you understand that this diagonal is the pocket pairs, and the upper quadrant is suited hands, Jack 5 of diamonds, Ace 8 of spades. The lower left quadrant is offsuit, Jack of hearts, 10 of spades, Ace of spades, 9 of diamonds, right? We are going to play within a range. We're looking for, when you're talking about starting hands, you're looking for 3 basic qualities of a hand. You're looking for high card power. The high card power, your aces, kings, queens, jacks, that's what the letters stand for. Ace Q is ace queen. You're looking for high card top pair power. You're also looking for suitedness. Can it make a flush? Are they both the same suit? And are they connected? Can they make straights? Your 0 gap, 1 gap, 2 gap cards are your stronger cards. The bigger the gap, like a king and a 7 can't make a straight, it's not very good. So, high card strength, suitedness, and connectedness. If we have those 3 qualities working for us, if we have 2 of those 3 qualities working for us, we have a decent starting hand. But we're going to play fewer of them from the early positions, and we're going to open up and play more of them from the later positions. Don't worry about left side, right side. I'll talk about that here in a second. In fact, let's just talk about it now. Understanding starting hand ranges. Okay? What we're looking at here on the left side of this graph is how we would play against a tighter player. I'm going to call them old men a lot in this video. That's my standard terminology for a tight player. There's a lot of different types of players. There's tight aggressive, there's tight passive. There's loose aggressive, and loose passive. There's guys that play loose aggressive pre-flop and tight aggressive post-flop. There's all sorts of player types that we have to kind of suss out at a table. But generally speaking, the tighter the player, the fewer hands he plays. Oftentimes, the better hands he plays. I don't know why it's moving on me like that. Often, the better hands. He's going to be up on this range of this starting range chart, these starting hands. He's going to be up here towards the topper end, the powerful stuff, because he just isn't playing enough. The more and more cards people play, the more they get down into this range here. But your tighter players that don't play a lot of cards are generally up in here. They're playing the very, very good cards. Okay? So, if we know that about those guys, we know typically what their starting cards might be. It makes them easier to play against. The looser a guy gets, he's playing worse cards, but it's harder to play against him. Okay? We can play him differently. We can play him much more aggressively. If I've got the tight old man sitting down there that doesn't play a lot of cards, I've got to play pretty straightforward. If I've got the looser, wilder, drunken Friday night type of player, I can play him a lot more aggressively because generally any cards that I deem reasonable are going to be ahead of whatever he wants to play. I'm going to have an advantage off of him just on card strength alone. And I can use that to my advantage. I can build a better pot against him. I'm going to get rid of this mouse. I can build a better pot, a bigger pot against him, and I can play better hands against him. Okay? Now, on these charts, the green hands are hands that we would play if everything folds to us. Nobody gets into the pot. Nobody starts off with a limp for $2 or nobody raises to 10. We can play any hands in green. Green, yellow, and red. But we can play any hands green or better. King 7 suited, fine. Ace deuce suited, fine. King jack offsuit, fine. Ace jack suited, fine. Play any of them. And we play them all to a raise. The yellow is if somebody ahead of us raised. Some guy, an old man, we're going to play these yellow cards here. We're going to just call his raise. He raises to $10 and we have jack 10 of hearts or pocket tens. We're just going to call that raise. He plays too good of a range. He plays too strong cards for us to get into too much trouble with right away. We're strong enough that if we hit a good flop, we can make a really, really strong hand against his otherwise strong hand and do some real damage with it. So it's worth playing. We have to be a little cautious up front. Now against the loose and drunk guy, we're going to call a few more hands, ace 9, ace 6, stuff like that. We're going to call ace queen offsuit. We're going to call his raise with a few more hands. But the big one is the red one. The red one is what we re-raise with. If somebody raises to $10 ahead of us, we're just calling the $10 with the yellow hands, but we're re-raising with the red hands. We're re-raising to 30, 35 bucks. Maybe if we are going to have to act first on later streets, flop, turn, river, with him, we might raise to 4 times his raise. He raises to $10, we're going to raise $30 to $35 if we act after him. And we're going to raise $40 to $45, maybe $50 if we act before him. Because we're going to make him pay for our positional disadvantage by having to act first going forward. Okay? So, against the tighter guy, though, he plays very, very strong cards. We're not going to do a whole lot of that re-raising stuff because we're just going to bloat a big pot and get ourselves into some trouble. We'd rather take a flop first, see what happens, and go from there. Against the loose, aggressive, drunken guy, though, we're getting in there with a lot more re-raising hands, a lot more bluffs, a lot more crazy stuff to keep throwing him off and keep getting paid all night long. Okay? Does that make sense? Let's move on to why we don't open limp. This is a disaster. This is one of the key signs. People ask a lot, how can you tell when you're sitting at a table, how can you spot the fish? Because again, if you can't spot the fish in 30 minutes at the table, it's you. You're the fish, right? Why? What are we looking for? One thing we're looking for is somebody who open limps. Somebody who is not in a blind, but just calls the big blind for $2. That is a hallmark of a fish. We should be looking for a couple of things. We should be looking for what types of cards he does that with, because everybody has an inflection point where, well, I'm just going to call here, but I would raise if I had this, right? We're going to look for that inflection because it tells us a little bit about the strength of his hand. It tells us when he limps in for just the $2 that he doesn't have aces. He doesn't have kings. He would have raised with that. He probably can't stand a whole lot of heat if we had aces or kings, because otherwise he would have raised and he would be advertising that he has good cards. So there's a whole lot of reasons why we don't want to open raise. It gives off information about our hand, and it allows us to be attacked. It allows us to be exploited. Going back to the intermediate poker podcast from last week, GTO versus exploitative ranges, and kind of how we use them and why. You don't want to set yourself up to be taken advantage of. You don't want to set yourself up to be exploited. Now, how much do we raise? Well, that depends on the scenario. Are you there on a Monday morning at 7:30 with the old men reading the newspaper and drinking coffee? Don't need to raise that much to kind of get some of them to fold, right? Are you there on a Friday night with 5 drunk guys sitting at your table and they have $1,000 in their stack? You might need to raise to $20 to $25 in that scenario. We're going to start with a default raise size. The default raise size is generally $1, $2, no limit. $12 to $15. Why? Because it thins the field and it builds a bigger pot. That goes hand in hand. That concept goes hand in hand. A lot of people miss it. A lot of people think that they only want to play pots heads up. That's partially true. When you're playing a pot heads up, me versus you, it is easier to play that pot. You can bluff me more. You can win with weaker cards. Your second pair might win. And you can get away with a little bit more. You can read me a little bit more, whatever. We can play a little cat and mouse game a little bit better. If there were 6 people in that pot, though, there's no bluffing. There shouldn't be. Because somebody probably hit something. And if it's all those recreational players that are just going to call you down to the river anyway, there's no bluffing there. They're not folding. You can't get them out of a pot. So don't sit, wait, make a hand, and then bet and get paid. Because they will pay you. So, but we want a ton of money in that pot when we have strong hands. So we need to raise more. We need to raise big enough that we get 1 or 2. We need to raise big enough that we build a big pot. But we need to raise also big enough that we get 1 to 2 callers and not 4 to 5. So there's that inflection point or that threshold. Generally, it starts around $12 to $15, and then you can start to adjust. Again, the closer you are to a Monday morning table, the lower you can adjust that number. The closer you are to that Friday evening drunk table, the higher you need to raise that number. And that's up to you to determine. It changes every day. It changes every time you sit down at a poker table, depending on who's sitting there and who's sitting where. And you need to find that inflection point and then start using it. Some days it's $8. Some days it's $17. Whatever. Figure it out. And that's an individual thing. But we're also playing somewhat balanced when we're not open limping. When we're playing a little bit tighter range, even up front. When you see this type of hand up front, well, let's go to the early position stuff and let's talk about that. If I go to the early position starting hands, you're playing up front. You're still playing some of the weaker hands. You might play your pocket 5s. You might play your 8-7 of hearts, even against a tighter table. Because you just can't have them thinking you're always on aces, kings, or ace-king. That's what everybody puts you on at the poker table. And you don't want that. You want them guessing, oh, maybe he has ace-4. Maybe he has pocket 7s. I need to play against him. And then find out they were wrong and you have big cards, and that's how you get your big cards paid. If they know you only have big cards when you enter a pot and you raise, they're just not going to give you a lot of action. So that's why we open the pot for a raise to build a bigger pot, but we open the pot with a little bit of a balanced range as well, so they can't always just put us on aces. Now, in your early position hands, again, versus a loose player or versus a tight player, to your right, the guy over there acting before you, the guys acting before you, we're going to act differently. We're not going to play as many cards up front, that's for sure. But really where early position stuff comes down to is not even calling raises, because we're calling all the yellow cards pretty much the same, maybe a little bit more against the loose guy, but pretty much the same. It's our re-raising range. We're going to re-raise a few more cards, a few more hands against the looser guy than we are the tight guy. But generally speaking, up front, under the gun +1, mid position 2, hands like that. First 4 or 5 spots after the blinds. Very tight, very straightforward. Again, you just can't stand a lot of heat in getting in big pots and making fancy plays and all that stuff. You've got to keep it straightforward, keep it in the powerhouse, and then when you hit your hand, punish people for it. When we get into the middle positions, hijack, low jack, that's 3 seats and 4 seats away from the dealer button. So you've got your button, and then your cutoff, and then your hijack, and then your low jack. So if you're 3 and 4 seats away from the button, you're late enough. You're in the middle, but you're late enough that you can start to play a few more hands. If it folds all the way around to you, open everything green or better. Queen 9 suited, ace 10 offsuit, 5-3 suited even, sure. Open it for a raise. Play. Too many people go to the casinos and they sit down and they try to play hands that are too weak from too early position. They get bored. They can't sit and fold all day. If you get that 5-3 of clubs from under the gun, don't play it there. If you get it from the hijack or low jack, you can start to play it. Again, these charts don't need to be memorized perfectly, but you need to be close. Okay, so don't sweat it about, well, is ace 4 in the range or not? Don't sweat that. Is it close? You can cut away some of the borderline hands when you're less experienced. If you're way, way more experienced, you might be able to add a few more borderline hands than are shown. You'll adjust in time and figure out what works for you and what keeps your decisions a little bit easier at a poker table. But the main thing is, once we get to those middle positions, hijack and low jack, we can start to open up a little bit. We can start to raise more. We can call a little bit more. We can re-raise a little bit more, especially against those loose guys. Now, against those tight guys, we're not doing a whole lot more. But against those loose guys, we're starting to mix in some more yellows and some more reds. That loose guy is not playing great cards. He's playing too many cards too often. So when he opens up from under the gun, I don't know what he could have. He could have just a wide range of stuff. I'm going to call him with my ace 6 of diamonds. I'm going to call him with my 9-8 of spades. I'm going to re-raise him with other stuff to really put him to the test and see where he's at. Okay? When we get to the later positions, the cutoff and the button, we open up even more. And this is going to start to depend on who is in the blinds behind us and who is, again, folding and calling and raising and stuff ahead of us. If it's the tight guy, it doesn't matter. Most of them have all folded anyway. But let's say we have a couple of tight guys in the small blind and the big blind. Now we can really go nuts. We can actually add a little bit more of this junky stuff in there and just steal their blinds because they're just not going to call and play many hands. Being that there's only 2 or 3 guys to act after us at this point, we just don't have that many people to get the rest of the way through to steal the blinds and take the pot. Now, if some of those guys are a little bit looser, then we got a little bit more to worry about. Maybe we've got a raise in front of us that we have to deal with, and we're gonna re-raise that one a lot more often. You know, we're also gonna call with some mediocre type of stuff too, because we're just not gonna fold all the time, right? But we're getting more information. We're getting better information. The closer we are to the button being last to act, the more profitable we can play with weaker cards. This is where we get rid of the boredom. If you're bored today and you get 5-3 offsuit under the gun and ace deuce offsuit, under the gun, and you don't want to play it, and you're just sick and tired of folding and folding and folding, wait for the day when you get this stuff on the button or in the hijack or something like that. Play it from there. It's going to be much easier to play. It's going to be more profitable to play. You're not going to get yourself screwed with terms like reverse implied odds, which is an intermediate term we'll talk about down the road. Things like that, okay? So, roughly speaking, play tighter from the small and big blinds as well. When you're in those blinds and you're posting the small blind and the big blind, blind defense at the small stakes is not a thing. It becomes a thing when you're playing in tournaments and the blinds are going up through the roof and your stack is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. You have to defend your stack. Absolutely, it becomes a thing. And we'll talk about that someday. But in those blinds, you're playing from out of position completely. Always. Your hands have to be a little bit stronger. In a typical small stakes game, you'll see guys do it every time they're in one of those blinds. Now, I'm not talking about the $2 big blind where you just check and they just limped around to you. I'm talking about calling raises. And you'll see this. Or sitting in the small blind for half the big blind, $1. And you see people throw that extra dollar in there. Heck, I do it. The rule of thumb should be, if you wouldn't play the hand on the button, don't play it. Let's say it comes around $2, $2, and you're sitting on the button. Would you play 8-4 of diamonds? Probably not. Probably shouldn't play it from the small blind either, because you're out of position the rest of the way. It's going to be very hard to play that hand correctly and profitably. Ace King? Yep, you'd play that. Jack 8 of hearts, probably. King Queen spade and a diamond, offsuit, sure, probably. Go ahead. In fact, you might raise a lot of those hands. That's fine. Okay? We just don't want to hear you. When you hear things at a poker table, like you hear a guy throw that extra dollar in there from the small blind, he's, well, I was priced in. I was getting 10-1 on my money. Yeah, fish talk. Absolute fish talk. There aren't very many good players that are going to say stuff like that. It's another sign. Like limping into the pot ahead of time, it's another sign that you should be listening to that tells you, I might have a donkey at the table. I might have a guy here who's just dumping money into the table. If you can avoid some of those common leaks that every other losing player has, you will automatically become a winning player. And like I said, just these few tips alone can turn you into a crusher. Okay? So blind defense is not a thing. It is in the tournaments. It is at higher stakes. It is definitely. But at the lower stakes, it's not. Just don't worry about it yet. Okay? It'll get you into more trouble than it will create money for you. Adapting to table dynamics. Let's talk a little bit about that. Players limping before you, again, weaker players, watch their showdowns. This is another part where you're looking for that inflection point. What do they raise? What do they call with? What hands can I put them on, or what hands can I eliminate when they do certain things? If they raise, I know they don't have 5-3 suited, right? So if the flop comes out 5-3-3, I know they don't have a full house. Same thing, if they limp, I know they don't have pocket aces, or ace-king, or ace-queen. So if the flop comes out ace 7-4, probably don't have a super strong hand. Okay? So by watching those showdowns and watching what they reveal at the end of the hand, even if you're not in the hand, you should always be watching at the poker table. Even if you're not in the hand, you can see, oh man, look at that. He limped with Queen Jack offsuit. Now a tighter player, an older man, might do that with like an ace king even. Oh my God, he limped with ace king. Well, that means when he raises, it's stronger than ace king. And that should scare the crap out of you when he raises. Also makes him very easy to play against. However, if you see somebody else limp 6-3 of clubs, then you know. Or if you see them raise Jack 9 of hearts, then you know when they raise, it's Jack 9 of hearts or better. And when they limp, it isn't even as strong as Jack 9 of hearts. Which tells me that when you limp into a pot, I can pound you with a raise with anything I feel is reasonable because you probably can't stand a lot of heat with those crappy cards because you limped. It's the sign of a fish at your table. That's why I'm telling you, don't open limp. Don't do it. Loose players raising before you. When a loose wild guy raises before me, again, I need to know where that threshold is. Is he doing it with Jack 9 suited? Is he doing it with 9-6 suited? Is he doing it with really, really crappy cards? If so, I can re-raise him with a lot more of my power cards. And I can just call along with a lot of the mediocre stuff that I would otherwise fold because he's playing such crappy cards, I can still beat him. Tight players raising before you. A lot more respect, right? Like I'm going to dump a lot of mediocre cards that I would have called the loose guy with. And I'm not going to re-raise him too often because by raising, if I see one of those old men that doesn't even raise with ace king, he just limps with it, then I know it's aces or kings. And I can just avoid him. Or better yet, I can play pocket pairs against him, flop a set, take his stack. It's a whole bunch of things we can talk about down the road. Tight players or loose players acting after you. Loose players acting after you, you need to tighten your range up a little bit. You can't loosen up as much. Because they're not going anywhere. They're going to get into pots with you. And now you're out of position against them, and you have to bet into them. And they're not telling you anything about their starting hands or their hand strength typically. They're just sitting there letting you just blow money into them. You have to respect that. You have to avoid that. However, tight players acting after you, you can get crazy. You can really turn into the table maniac. Because those guys are just not going to defend themselves and stand up for themselves. I sat in a situation the other day where I had actually 3 old men in their 80s sitting to my left. 1, 2, 3. Well, every time I got around to the low jack, which meant one old man was in the hijack, one old man was in the cutoff, and one old man was on the button, I raised with my button range, my late position starting hand range. Jack 7 suited, raise. Queen 5 suited, raise. Ace 3 suited, raise. Pocket 5s, raise. 5-4 suited, raise. Ace 8 offsuit, raise. Why? They were just going to fold unless they really had king, queen, or 2 9s or something like that. They were just going to fold. I'm taking advantage of that. I'm exploiting the fact that they fold too much by opening up my range and pounding them into oblivion. Guess what else I'm doing? I'm quote unquote buying the button. Once those 3 guys get out of the way, I'm the last one to act at the table. I've just bought myself perfect position at the table. I've raised the pot, I've made it a bigger pot, and I've bought myself position to act after everybody else the rest of the hand, so I can set myself up for a very profitable situation. As a result, it's a very profitable day. I made about $680. All because of that little seat that I had. And that's another podcast. We'll talk about choosing your seat and how to play different players in different seats. Your starting hands need to adjust a little bit for every scenario. That's the exploitation I was just talking about. If a loose guy's to your right or a loose guy's to your left. If a tight guy's to your right or tight guy's to your left. If the table is mixed, kind of like baseball where they do right, left, right, left, right, left through the lineup. Or some days you end up with 2 or 3 maniacs on your right and all the tight guys on your left. And when that day happens, you're in a very good seat. Don't change for anything. Example starting hand scenarios. Under the gun folds to you, and you hold pocket queens. Do you raise? Well, you're the first one in the pot. You're opening the pot for, you're not limping. We just talked about that. So yes, you're going to raise. How much? I don't know. What's the threshold? Will 10 get a caller or 2? Or will it get 5 callers? If not, raise more. 15, 17, 18. Will that fold everybody out? Or will that get a caller or 2? Or will it get 3 or 4 callers? If it's 3 or 4 callers, raise it even more. The scenario we talked about before was if I raised to $10 and 3 people call me, it's a $40 pot. And it's 4 ways, and I'm out of position. That's not a good spot for me. Not a good spot for me at all. However, if I raise to $20 and only 1 guy calls me, now I'm in a little bit better position at the table. I'm still out of position, but I'm in a little better spot at the table. I can play the hand a little bit more aggressively with just 1 guy in there, and it's the same $40 pot. I'm building a bigger pot with fewer people in it. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what develops the winning session. Is the bigger pots I can make with fewer people in them, the better off I'm going to be, because I can play more aggressively. I can actually bluff once in a while. I don't have to just play bingo poker where I sit down and have to hit 2 pair on the flop to be aggressive. If you get into a casino and 4 and 5 and 6 people are taking flops with you all the time, it's going to be very hard to win. You can control that with your raise sizes, okay? 2 players limp in. Next scenario. 2 players limp in, and you are in the cutoff with ace-10 of hearts. 2 players limped in front of you. Do you raise? I hope so. It's on the chart. I hope so. How much? Well, this gets a little bit different. You start with that default size. Let's say your default size was 6 times the blind, $12, because most of the time that's getting the field thinned down to 1 to 2 players, and you're in decent-sized pots. Well, you've got 2 guys that have shown interest. So now you're going to add a couple of big blinds for each limper. So I've got 2 big blinds. That's $2, $4, because I have 2 limpers. So if my default raise size is like $12, 14, 16, I'm raising it to $16. If a 3rd guy got in there, 18. A 4th guy, 20. Starting at my 12, and I'm adding $2 for every limper that enters the pot. Why? I'm trying to get a big pot going with 1 or 2 people in it. Next scenario. 4 players limp, and you're on the button with 8-4 of diamonds. Are you going to raise it? Hope not. You probably should fold. Not on the charts. Not a good spot for you. Right? Now, if no players limped and you're on the button, and the blinds were 2 tight old men, absolutely raise that pot, because we don't open limp. Raise that pot, steal those blinds. Give them the opportunity to fold. They'll fold. If they're tight, they'll fold. Now, if a loose player's in the blinds, 8-4 suited, probably not good enough. That's where you have to manipulate those starting hand ranges a little bit on your own. It takes practice. It takes some work. It takes a lot of discussion, which is why we should be in those Discords talking. We can help with these scenarios and, again, turn you into a casino crusher, a red chip hero, if you will. If you're first to act under the gun and you look down at Queen of Spades, Jack of Hearts, do you raise? The answer is probably no, because it's not on the charts. How much? Well, nothing. You probably fold. You're not going to throw in $2. I know you want to play the hand. I know you want to play the hand. And I know if you got it on the cutoff or the button, you'd probably raise or you'd probably play the hand. Sorry, you didn't get it there. Fold. It's setting you up to put you in a crappy spot. You're going to get in there and you're going to raise that pot because remember, we don't open limp. You're going to say, Queen Jack, ooh, good. I haven't seen this hand for a half hour. You raise $12. You get 2 callers. Next thing you know, you got 2 guys that are acting after you. And you get a Queen 7-6 type of flop with 2 hearts on it. And you're like, oh, crap. Now what? I've got top pair. I've got to defend my hand. I've got to bet. I've got the best hand probably. You bet. And some guy calls. Turn card comes. You bet again. Some guy calls. River card comes. You check. He bets. And you're like, oh, God, I have no idea what he has. And he flips over ace queen. And you are screwed the whole time. That's why you avoid that situation from under the gun. That's why you avoid that situation altogether. It's a very hard situation to navigate, so avoid it. Next scenario, 5 players limp, and you are the big blind. With aces. Yeah, I hope you raise. 5 people limped in front of you. I hope you raise the $20. $10 to $12 plus 5, limpers is $2 for each limper, is another $10. So I'm hoping, $20 to $24 should be your raise size there. Hell yeah. Get that money in there. Get 1 or 2 players to call you, make it a $70 pot, and then just go take them to town. Build a big pot and get it all. But what if they flop a set against? Well, it's going to happen some. And you'll usually find that out. You'll flop 10, 8, 4, 2 diamonds, and you'll bet, and they'll call. And then the turn will be a 3. You'll bet. They'll raise, and you're like, oh, crap. What else would raise me there? Probably a set of 10s. I'm screwed. Okay, fold. That sucked. Cost me $125. But at least it didn't cost you $250 because, again, they will tell you what to do. They will tell you what they're doing. Ace, king of diamonds, same thing. Raise big. Raise big. Jacks, 2 jacks, raise big. Yes, same raise. $20 to $24 each time, each of those hands. Don't start doing the whole, well, this hand's not as strong, so I only raise this to 12, but this hand is really strong, so I raise this to 20. Guess what you're doing? You're giving away information. You're giving away a pattern. Somebody's going to find that out about you, and they're going to adjust accordingly, and then you are at a disadvantage. Just raise it to the same size, $20 to $24. Ace 5 of hearts. Well, now maybe we just call the $2. It's not that great. I know it's one of the hands on the chart that can raise, so raise it some. Maybe don't raise it every time. Maybe look at the players ahead of you or behind you and see kind of how that hand might play out. You're really looking for the nut flush there. 9-8 of spades, same scenario. You can raise it sometimes. Say queen 10 offsuit. No, you're not raising it there. You're raising a pretty tight range from that big blind, especially with 5 people in front of you, because it's just going to be hard to get that pot heads up or 3 ways. It's going to be hard to play it out of position. So you need some really, really strong cards to handle that. 9-8 suited can flop a straight flush. Sure, we'll make a big pot then. You got 5 dudes in there with you. Somebody's got something too, and they'll probably pay you off. Just don't do it ahead of the flop, right? Don't give them a chance to fold, the other hands that might pay you off down the road. Another scenario, a loose player raises from under the gun +1. And you're in mid position with pocket 10s. You probably re-raise. Like I said before, the further away you are from the button, the further off of the button you are, the more inclined you should be to re-raise that hand. So pocket 10s, pocket queens, ace king, king queen suited. You should probably be re-raising those hands. Isolate that guy. Get it to yourself. He raises to 15, you make it 45. The next thing you know, everybody else behind you isn't going to pay 45 to see a flop unless they've got really, really, really good cards. And so he calls the 45, you're at 45 and 45, you're in a $90 pot. You've got position on the guy and nobody else to worry about behind you. It's a good spot to be in a big pot with good cards. Ace 5 suited? Okay, maybe not. Totally up to you. You could call that one, you could raise it. You could even fold it. If it's an old man, you could fold it. King Jack of hearts, same type of scenario. Depends on how loose the guy is, depends on who's to act after you, but the same thing. If he raises to 15 and you decide you're going to re-raise this, re-raise it to $45. Get it alone. Get it with that guy. Just him. Hope he doesn't have king queen or ace king. If he has ace king, he should re-raise you again. You should know. If you raise me to 15 and I re-raise you to 45, and it gets back around to you, and now instead of 45, you make it 110 or $120. Oh boy. I guess my king, queen, my king jack's no good. My ace five's probably no good. I can fold those. My pocket tens are probably no good. My queens, my ace king, okay, now we're in trouble. That's just the way it goes. That's just poker. But generally, the reason that if you never call a bet, if you only fold or only raise, like a guy raises in front of you and you don't call it, you either fold or you re-raise him, usually your hands get very easy to play because you are always putting them to the test. The minute you start calling, now you don't know what he has anymore. Is he really strong or is he making a move on you? Well, if you raise him and he calls, now you know he's probably pretty strong. Or he folds, maybe he was making a move on you. Typically don't call, either raise or fold in a lot of cases. Okay? So just another wide-ranging generic tip that'll keep you out of trouble. Last scenario, you're in the low jack. That's 4 off of the button. Cut off, or button, cut off, hijack, low jack. 4 off of the button. You're in a pretty middle position. 3 tight players are to your left, and you find yourself down there with 7-5 of hearts. Yep, raise. You're fine. If they call, adjust. You know they got good cards. Flop might come 5-7 king. Now you got ace king trapped. Great. Make a lot of money. Maybe you've got 6-8 of hearts on the flop and you've flopped the open-ended straight flush draw. My God, get stacks in the middle as fast as you can without scaring them. That's okay. But most likely, they're just going to fold. And you're going to be last to act in the hand with, it's a speculative starting hand, but the other people don't know that because you raised. You didn't just limp like everybody else does. You raised. You can have ace king. You can have 2 queens. They don't know. So that flop comes queen, 3, 4. And you're like, oh my God, 5-7 sucks. I need a 6 to make a straight. 5 and a 7 don't get me top pair. I don't have a flush draw here, but guess what? There's a queen out there. That ought to scare them. They check to you. You bet $20. They fold. Oh, you must have had the queen. I had you on the king queen. Nice miss, donkey. Thanks for the money. And if they do call you anyway because they had the queen, you might get lucky and hit that 6 on the turn, and then you really got them over a barrel. These are the things we'll talk about more. These are the things that we will teach you in this poker community. Hopefully you get a lot out of this podcast. Hopefully you like the hand scenarios. Hopefully you like the charts. Hopefully you like the lessons. Hopefully you're feeling a little bit more confident that, oh my gosh, if I just come to this Discord and join in, I can really learn some poker and go to the casino and have a good chance at actually winning money. Because you ain't going to win it at slots. You ain't going to win it at craps. You ain't going to win it at blackjack. I think we all know that. You can win it at poker. Just don't be the worst guy at the table. Look for these ways to find the fish. Realize you're not the ultimate fish at the table, and you are all of a sudden in a profitable chair. The better you get at this, the more profitable your chair will be. You can make $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a year part-time playing poker. Why? Because of these things that I'm going to show you in this community. So, just to remember your position at the table. The later we act, the more information we gather, the more hands we can play profitably. There is no need to memorize these charts. Just get close. Shouldn't intimidate you. Just get close. I review these charts all the time. I'm close. I don't have them. I don't play them exactly perfectly, but I'm close. Once you get there, you'll be close too, and it'll be fine. Open for a raise. Don't just limp. Limping is death. You can limp after other people have limped, but don't open the pot for a limp. Just get that out of your mind right now. Typically, don't even call along. Raise or fold. That helps too. But again, you get more information the later you are to act in the hand. So protect that spot. It's a very valuable spot. For more discussion, of course, follow that link. Get in our Discord room. It's free. It's free. It's free. We'd love to talk to you. We'd love to teach you more poker. From the beginning player to the intermediates. And in fact, if you want to help out because you're an intermediate player yourself, please jump in and help us. We want to build a community. We want to build a big community. We want to build a poker community and add it to the daily fantasy sports and sports betting stuff that we're already building. Thanks for watching Red Chip Heroes Poker Podcast Monday morning, and I will catch you guys on the flip side next week if we're not talking in the Discord. See you later.